Hüp. Hüp.
Hi guys, to your September monthly. So I pulled a few cards that is going to be pretty much for all of us. Maybe our messages, maybe our reading, general reading for basically this transition. And it's kind of like really telling to me. It starts with Milky Way. It was the first card that came through it, and it kind of like really got me giggling because I'm rewatching those series through the wormhole with Morgan Freeman. So if you haven't seen it, it's kind of like really interesting to really see how basically that physics interact with most likely even our spirituality, and how we are comprehending those, I mean, additional or alternate realities, right? Because as you know, Earth is the part of the Milky Way, and but Milky Way has probably billions, you know, it is probably one of billions of galaxies that we actually know in the universes that we are absorbing, right? It has, I don't know, billions, probably 400 billion stars, and it is the one that is the closest to the sun. And it's kind of like interesting because they have managed to, everything that you see on in the sky is basically past. You're not seeing the present because it takes time for the light to come and reflect. So everything that we see is not really what is going on in that moment. So it's kind of like a concept in itself that kind of like we need to kind of like wrap our head around. So this, it's kind of like really interesting for this month because we are going through basically Virgo transition, and actually also Libra, so I can see actually both kind of like sending their own messages, right? So this is really telling us to regain our perspective. Maybe we strayed away, maybe we kind of like lost gravity, maybe certain people don't gravitate toward us or we don't gravitate toward them, right? It simply kind of like it is time to possibly step back and then allow ourselves to detach in order to kind of like gather information, right? And it's kind of like going into that internal aspect of ourselves that kind of like observes life instead of life basically happen to us, right? It also is basically telling us to look at things from different point of view, from kind of like understanding that hey, we are part of this big universe, right? We kind of need to kind of like understand not only where our position is, but also how everything can affect us, and how maybe even the small emotion can affect the entire basically universe. So it's kind of like really interesting because the next time is dream time, and this is kind of like this beautiful story. And I know that the Australians are going to correct me because this is talking about the Aboriginals of Australia, right? And this is basically their place that exists before time. So it's just like when I saw these cards coming out, I was really giggling because this also talks about how basically Earth was formed, right? And they're talking about that they had this ancestral ancient ancestral, what is the word, spirits that kind of like remained in the kind of like very forms that was created, so including all these animals and hills and stars and all these kind of like other features that we kind of like see around us. It's basically kind of like basically continue to present today their gods, right? So this is really talking about our either individual but also I believe group spiritual template that kind of, in particularly in this card, talks about things that have been passing down from one generation to another. So we are talking about at least 60,000 years, although those aboriginals would say they existed since the beginning of time. So in one of those traditions, right, there is this creation story that is involving this Daijiraidu, which I think it's pronounced, and correct me if I'm wrong, this kind of like hollow, right, log that kind of like emits kind of like woo, that kind of like droning sound when kind of like is being played. It's kind of like really nice. It's kind of like really gets you into this vibration, and you kind of like really start feeling that connection when you hear it. So, you know, kind of like it is again time to kind of like sink deeply and understand that sort of like you are that crossover between spirit and physical reality. So it's like a breathing, comes in and comes out. What are you letting in and what are you letting out? Maybe it's going to be kind of like some kind of realization, because this is very much like Hermit card. It talks about solitude. No, it doesn't talk about loneliness. It really talks about the quality that we need to have in order to kind of like understand that, you know, sometimes we need to pull things inside of us to understand, express our own creativity. Maybe something got stuck. Maybe there was like sort of like stalemate. Maybe for some reason certain things couldn't happen. Maybe they're not part of the big picture, right? Because it could be that you're talking about a person. This is this card called Loyal Heart. And it's kind of like really amazing to really see, because as you know, Libras are always kind of like thinking in those terms, right? That, you know, there is like this royalty. And what I really like about this card is like that these two owls are actually looking in each other's eyes. So there is like this big heart, and there is like this big understanding between the two of them. That's kind of like I really feel was more or less talking about us personally needing to reconnect. Maybe we got disconnected. We need to reconnect and understand how our actions are affecting other people. That also, even on the lonely island, the tree is going to grow and be magnificent, and nothing is going to stop, not even a storm, because the light always can be found, right? Maybe we need to find Loyal Heart. Maybe that is what is happening, because I really think this is really addressing the later part of the month, but that's maybe some kind of like self-understanding that we need to kind of like come to. Maybe this is really talking about our partnerships and friendships and romantic relationships, right? Maybe they have some qualities in common. It is really good to kind of like see this, because part of this reflection is going to be, this is the mirror of me, right? So this is really talking about also us being dedicated and devoted back to our friends, to kind of like express that faithfulness. And I really think it's going to really be all around, kind of like understanding that maybe we pushed too far or we didn't do enough, and kind of like coming into this balance. It is kind of like really, really interesting, because this is telling me that your kind of like long-term loyalty to your goals is going to become kind of like very evident in this world of conditions where, you know, all our aspirations for success kind of like sometimes assume form kind of like in reality, but success is nonetheless looks like taking shape, and it was inside job over here from what I see. We kind of like really need to kind of like in all this kind of like process stay flexible, because if we are inflexible, what do you expect to come out of that process? We kind of like have to kind of like come to this kind of like bigger perspective that is basically talking about here. So I really would not advise any kind of like stubbornness of any kind. Now, interestingly enough, that we did get here Thunderbolt and the Outsider. None of them is a good card. So it is really telling me this is that basically Tower card. But here, as you can see, lots of people are jumping off instead of from Tower, from here. This is really telling me about ego death. it is really telling me that we need to shed some aspects of ourselves that maybe we were like really holding on for such a long time. Maybe we kind of like felt as an outsider. We would always maybe meet people who would always keep us, some kind of like foot away, or kind of like it was always a distance that we couldn't somehow overcome, even if we tried it. The truth is, like, this came reversed. So this is telling me that maybe something is happening that we are even clueless about something, because we all build our own egos, we all build our own life. It's basically all this house of cards is like all that ego stuff, where especially we are getting really like more and more kind of like divided with choices, and we don't have any more universal news and universal things, and we keep looking for things that will reinforce our basically already viewpoint. And this is really telling me that this is something that you are needing to really deal with. Maybe this month you want to kind of try to just to listen to something different, attend to classes that otherwise you wouldn't attend, kind of like really talk to people who are much different. Because look at this card. Hello, hello. Who came to say hi to everybody? Say hi. Say hi here to camera. Camera, that's it. Pretty girl. Walk up. So this is kind of interesting because some people don't like when my kitty cat Sapphire comes over here. And this divining, it's all about observation and it's intuition. Intuition usually kicks in and clues in when you are really observant of this perspective. And this perspective is like, this is what happened. Just like as I was saying, some friendships and some kind of like love relationships will become coming to you to acknowledge that. Just like Safi jumped in, said hi, and I love you. And I really think this is like something we can really look forward. I think there are some conditions though, and these conditions would be few things that we really need to figure out. Also, maybe what obstacles we have created, and if this is a really big deal, or how to really kind of like get off that high horse, how important we are, because we live in really strange times, right? And this card, as I was just about to say, look at us through this fence, how beautiful these colors are. And of course, this little child looking inadequate, it's kind of like looking what is out there. I really, really want to be there, and what's going on. Maybe the child is in the garden and looking out, but maybe looking into something else. Now, I think the key in this picture is this basically chain. And look at this chain. It is opened. It doesn't take much to really take away this chain. So now these two cards together, what do you chain yourself to it? What kind of beliefs are you holding that maybe need to be released? You have to figure out if something that you were really holding as really important, this is who I am, without this I cannot live. Try to shed all these kind of like core principles to a minimum, and you will see how you're going to really be able to embrace more people as well as to be embraced. So this is kind of like a general part of the reading, and now we are going to go in the individual signs. Guys, I still have the speed up promotion. Still, if you order your own reading, you will get it much shorter. So instead of 3 weeks, you're getting in a week. For the regular one, instead of 1 week for a rush one, you're going to get it in 3 days. And urgent, it used to be 3 days, now it's like 24 hours. So kind of like make your pick, and you can check it via my website, cattarot.ca. And guys, let's not forget that there is a contest going on where you can win a 15-minute reading with me. Part of it is like leaving comments over here on Facebook or on Instagram, and that's going to be one winner a month that I'm going to pull from basically all of these guys. But there's going to be a much maybe faster way if you come to my live, which is every Saturday at 11 o'clock EST. You need to comment so we know that you are there. Just say hi, and some of the moderators are going to kind of like make the pick. They can call it any time. You have to be present in order to get the award, and you get this like 15 minutes with me, and from that point you will just need to contact me and you're all set. And of course, nothing beats private reading. This is just your energy and me, and we are really looking down and trying to find not only what's up, but also what is the best way out of it. And this is it. Let's start with this month's Taroscopes. Hi Virgo, and happy birthday, and I wish you all the best during your transition. It looks like it's going to be a really interesting one and the sunny one. So let's see what's on the bottom of the deck. Wow, unrequited love and Two of Swords. It's kind of like really interesting because I'm seeing the baseline over here, and the cards that were popping up were getting to know each other and calling your soulmate. And it sounds to me that it could be sort of like one of those things, as per this introduction and the general energy, we will all have to kind of like figure out sort of like, why are we continuing on the path that we are continuing? Like, if we have not been, let's say, receiving love the way we want to, we have to ask why. And were we continuously kind of like striving for the wrong person, or wanted people to love us instead of just being authentic and allowing things to kind of like really happen? Because this is really telling me that either you are going to, give somebody a chance, one more chance, or you're going to just realize that what is working for you and what not. It's kind of like very striking to me, this sun kind of like in this particular connection. With the Knight of Wands being reversed and then the Sun and the Hierophant in a combination, it just like sounds to me that somebody here is going to become kind of like clear that this person, he or she, really doesn't want to stay. Or maybe we are going to kind of like really put a newfound enthusiasm in something that maybe has been waning. Maybe somebody reappeared from the past. Maybe there is somebody who we don't think is committed as much as we are. Because the Sun card in any reading, it just like throws sunshines on everything, even on the darkness, even on walking this tightrope. And it kind of like sounds to me that it could have been a relationship that has been either riddled with jealousy, and since you're not a really jealous sign, it kind of like sounds to me that somebody was like pulling the rug under your feet, and you were always grasping to see and try to make the structure out of what is being offered. And the structure it will be, because you're getting your sister sign, the Hierophant, which is kind of like really Taurus flavor. And in this particular card, we are really talking about rules. And it's sort of like the group rules. It's sort of like what we as a society, as civilization have. But sort of like, what do we agree upon? Because this card also can be card of children and card of marriage. And this definitely is card of marriage. So I do have a feeling that you will either let somebody go, or it might be a proposal on the table. It's going to be really, really interesting, because something might even look dark before it goes to light. But in any case, you're going to really come to some kind of like understanding, getting to know this person better, trying to resolve if certain things have to be this way that you feel they have to be, if certain things are changeable and certain things are not changeable. But this card, which generally in the regular tarot decks show this like little child on a white horse, kind of like, it's that innocence, it's that trust, that kind of like where we are heading. You never know what's going to be there, what's going to happen to us, but we are still hoping for the best. So let's lay down the cards. You have honeymoon, and wow, past life relationships. There we go. Love yourself first. You deserve love. Finances and career. Religious factors, which kind of like is similar to that Hierophant card. Codependency, and I think that's kind of like was this general part of this reading that connected. Children, there we go. We have this connection clearly over here, and I think this could be that past life relationship we're going to see. And there you go, engagement, which again comes here, and heart-to-heart conversation. So we're going to leave this unrequited love, because I think for some of you, you will kind of like really need to let go of the partner who maybe you'll realize was not there for the ride anyway. They were there calling when they wanted to call, how that was like pleasing to them, and maybe you are going to kind of like stop these illusions, right? And kind of like wrapping yourself around them. Look at this card. You deserve love. You're lovable. The truth, when this card comes out, it tells me that maybe you have felt you are not lovable and that you have to put up with certain things or with somebody because, hey, I'm not good, so they're not good. That can be good approach, because that really talks about not only positioning but kind of like self-awareness. But the truth is that depends what it was. If somebody was just calling you at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, oh, I just missed you, well, they can miss you at 10 o'clock in the morning as well, and not when they really need their booty call, right? So maybe you have been doing things to yourself that you were desperately trying to even make a sense of some relationship, and now it is like really time to kind of like aim at where you need to go. This is a really, really good card, actually, but the basically trip toward that goal goes through love yourself first. And that, I really think, it's the bottom line this month for all the signs, and this is like specifically coming really strongly for you. And again, your self-respect makes you more romantically attractive. Kind of like really, really interesting, because it looks like to me that you are maybe resolving some kind of karma, or at the very least you're kind of like dealing with a situation where you kind of like realize that you have so much to contribute and you're not kind of like willing to debate this anymore. You're kind of like saying to yourself, listen, I have so much of life left, and I should embrace it. I should really kind of like enjoy going kind of like forward in this kind of like journey. And it's kind of like almost like energizing you. So let's kind of like double down the cards and see what it is. I'm going to tell you which card these are, because not everybody is familiar with my cut cards. So let's start. This is the past that you had with this you deserve love. It was just feeling that, one person is going upstairs, another one downstairs. It's kind of like push and pull, but this is the card which kind of tells me there was no teamwork. It was like kind of like two people having two different directions, and there is this codependency which is now coming out twice. So let's put these guys aside on the side, because I have something to say about that. This kind of like is good when it's kind of reversing, because maybe you have been dealing with somebody who you had a hard time letting go of, right? This is like this card of chains, just like, remember this card that I had in my opening intro? Kind of like that motive is here now, basically repeating. And just like in this intro, these chains are not really there to imprison you. These chains, you have to release something which made you be somebody you are not, because sometimes we kind of like encounter a person who kind of like takes the worst out of us, and that usually happens when you have this card past life relationships, where there's like kind of like push in a new direction, and you're probably wondering, what the heck am I morphing into this monster? This is not me. So you have to figure out what basically triggered you, and usually karmic relationships or somebody who is kind of like trying to surface, and it doesn't even have to be an aspect of us that is kind of like coming out. It's just like simply observation that it can happen to us, and it's giving us this kind of greater understanding and a sense of love. Maybe you really waited for somebody to kind of like come to you and send you like these love message. This is like definitely about arrows of love. Maybe something didn't arrive. This is like really, to me, talking about healing, or trying to maintain something that kind of like is really not workable. This card came reversed. So when this codependency or the devil card comes reversed, right? Because now you both have this one and this one cards, which are also kind of like earth cards. So it is kind of like telling you that you really need to challenge all these bad parts in you, even if they're minuscule, and also not really jump to judgment of anybody who is exhibiting that, because if you kind of like realize that we all can kind of like fall and we can all kind of like make mistakes, maybe they also deserve to kind of like really exhibit their own things. If they are right for us, that's a different story. But just understanding it's something that definitely you're being called for. Now, love yourself first. Like, this is really talking about this inner maturity. The Emperor card is like sort of like having this like huge 360 around us. And again, just like that card perspective, if you remember from my introduction, it's kind of like, how are we positioned here? And you need to love yourself instead of like always thinking what other people think and how you should live your life for them. Sure, some rules are really important, and that's why this card over here talks about, yeah, that you should be really clear about these rules, because you want to find somebody who kind of like adhere to the same kind of like school of thought. Well, we are like in the serious relationship, it's a monogamy. You do not call me at 2 o'clock. We are spending weekends together. Sort of like if both people kind of understand the same thing, that's great. But it looks like that there is one person here that might be kind of like willing to just like do whatever they want to do, and that can be very destabilizing. And it is very destabilizing. But self-respect, what does that mean? Doesn't mean telling person off. It's kind of like a huge difference between this like knee-jerk reaction and being kind of like, well, I'm going to show you, and sort of like knowing what you need. If you ever watch that movie Notting Hill, it's kind of like a nice movie if you like romantic movies like I do. And it's kind of like really interesting how he had approach when something really happened in a relationship. And yeah, I'm not going to tell you, because if you didn't watch it, it will be really nice. Because look, having that self-respect and knowing that, somebody can say, well, I'll call you when I have time. It's kind of like sometimes we don't want to let go because we don't want to lose the person. But it's not true. We are always losing a person, even a person who is more important. We are losing ourselves. So we have like this 10 of cups over here, and saying that you need to go through this process of stabilizing, of understanding who you are, of the growth, right? To kind of like understand this kind of like this love that is all around us, that kind of like sometimes we feel that somebody just like took us out with a spoon from this kind of like soup of love and is like testing us out. But truth is, we kind of like belong into kind of like this huge thing. And look at this, also 9 of cups. 9 of cups is like about these cards that are sort of like our wishes for ourselves. So kind of like, because the nines all kind of like relate to you, because the Hermit card, which represents Virgo, is a number 9, like all the other nines will also kind of like really vibrate with your kind of like frequency. It kind of like needs to be understood here that everything comes in its own time and its own place, right? You have all these 4s over here in your reading, and 5, and like these are all kind of like talking about sort of like figuring out what is your core. So we're not talking beginning 0 and 1 or ending 9 and 10, right? So we are like somewhere in the middle. So there is like sort of like the center of us that we kind of like need to address, and need to address like really what you want. You have basically 3 knights. The knights don't tend to stay. So it's kind of like a thing that's saying, well, some things happen for a reason, some things happen for the season, and some things happen for a lifetime. It is kind of like understanding different maturity of people, different level of what people can bring to us, what can we bring to them. And it's just like realization that sometimes it doesn't work in spite of everything, right? For you here, what is in that center of you is like that willingness for honeymoon and this past life relationship. For the some of you, I think, guys, that there is somebody who is protective here. And if I really have to call it, I would say it is you. I would say that you are protecting yourself from hurt. Maybe you're dealing with somebody who probably is just going from flower to flower, thinking that they're a little bit kind of like busy bee. But truth is, it doesn't look like this is something that you really want. Because look at this kitty, Four of Pentacles. He's sitting on his chest of toys. Can he play with the toys when they are in? No. But the truth is, like, when we kind of like get in this situation, we start to be very protective of us, especially if we think there is a possibility of some kind of like pain that can come our way, and we erect these big walls. The walls are protecting us, but they're also protecting us from good things to come to us. Honeymoon is really about trying to always look on the positive side. And sure, like, I mean, some school of thoughts believe in that. I don't necessarily subscribe to that, because that, hey, always say yes to everything, always do this, kind of like really only ends up like with you being a doormat. And that's not really even healthy. So I really feel, and wow, we have like my most dislike card over here. So I really feel that maybe some of you do not really want to see things that you need to see. And this card in particular, Seven of Swords, is really talking about, look, can you see that? Those little mice kind of like running the show. If you can see anything. See, they're running the show and escaping with the cheese while Kitty is sleeping, right? So it's like kind of like sleeping on a switch. So this is really talking about some possibly indecent behavior, and there we have the last night. All of them are here. It's something really transient that maybe it even has manipulative kind of like aspect of it. Knight of Cups kind of like has that kind of like rare quality of the person who has like these big dreamy eyes, who is going to look at you in the eyes and you're going to melt. You're going to love them instantaneously. And they're going to make you huge promises, such as like how we just met and they already want to marry you, and everything feels so right because they kind of like give you these basically great visions of how, you know, this is kind of like you're perfect for each other, that you actually even start to question yourself. Now, when the Knight of Cups reverses like that, it's really talking about a person who is dreaming aloud, and the person that they have in their mind is actually the perfect person, not you. And that's where, you know, like you being this very pragmatic and practical, right, and protective of yourself, it kind of like really didn't work, because somebody's just like disarming you and taking things away from you, just like with so kind of like Trojan kind of like horse kind of a thing, entering there and lowering your defenses. But in this case, it looks like you have been really guarded for a reason. And don't overly romanticize this person, because sure, he or she comes across very kind of like lovey-dovey, but they might not be really thinking what they are saying. They might be just like, you know, having their movie, just creating their own movie. Now, this is kind of like really interesting combination. It says past life relationship, and then you have Knight of Swords. And Knight of Swords is that knight that is like the fastest, right? So we see a fast knight over here, but this one was reversed, right? So this one has the sun in his like back, and it's kind of like that vicar and kind of like saddling the fox. But this one is the fastest, as you can see. The energy is the highest, and it is like a very, very dangerous kind of, you know, bird of prey over here. So the Knight of Swords is really kind of like talking about getting down to the truth, understanding the truth. And usually we all kind of like live and meet many people from our past lives. They come in one form or the other in our relationship, but only a few of them we write into our chart. So if you want, get my karmic reading and we can kind of like pick up on the people that you wrote or why. And the people we wrote in our chart are there to really either to fulfill the promise they have given to us, or asking of us to fulfill the promise given to them in the past life, or very often I see that here to put us back on the right path that we were supposed to be on. Sometimes this is really kind of like painful, but here they are for that reason. And I think this is the reason that is your reason. And there you go, you're getting the World. World is like amazing card. It is like just like the Sun, a really positive card. So like these two cards plus the Star are my favorite cards in this entire deck. The World means karma accomplished. You are kind of like maybe getting your truth, maybe speaking your truth, maybe kind of like getting complete understanding intellectually what you need to do. You're finding the right words to say it. You are kind of like grounding yourself and are able to kind of like dream just like new dreams. You see, this is like, I mean, this big infinity here saying just because you finish one cycle, it doesn't mean that you're going in another one. It might not look much different because look, the kitty is still sitting on the pillow and still kind of like having this bowl of milk. But the truth here is that we kind of like did resolve something, and the next cycle is going to be easier to handle and easier to kind of like move forward. Some of you maybe are having issues at work. It says financial issues are a factor, so it might be a strain, but it might be that I didn't take another card over here for this, and this is like, look at this overall joy of kind of like you're going to all of a sudden feel lighter. You're going to get some quality that is going to make you, as it said here, more lovable, more approachable. It's kind of going to be weird because on one hand, you're going to be like that hermit, kind of like, look, leave me alone. It usually happens when you don't want them, they want you, right? That's kind of like how it goes. And maybe you have other things on your mind. Maybe career is on your mind. Maybe you're kind of like figuring out, well, it's the beginning of the school. There are like all these expenses for the kids, I have to figure it out. And it's a little bit kind of like nightmarish kind of like feeling. This card can also talk about rejection. This card can talk about separation. I can certainly see that some of you also will be going through that. And maybe with that, it's going to be that financial strain and thinking about the direction. You're getting lots of 11s when I keep adding those cards, and this is all kind of karmic, and it's all basically about positioning yourself into kind of like tuning into a much higher vibration. 11s are angel vibration, and with that vibration you basically don't want to be caught doing something bad, right? And also angels would not want you to be with people who are not appreciating you, because look at this, it's saying like things will actually work out. It's going to like be that, crossing over these troubled waters, and hope is like that there is like some safety on the other side. So there's a little kitty in this like 6 of swords, and this is like could be our inner child, that we kind of like, we still have the issues, we still have problems, but maybe like there is like this point where we actually have to start making some active motions forward, even if you are like really feeling pain. What most people forget when they feel pain is that we need to actually bless this pain. Yes, I know it sounds weird, but just like, love, they're like existing, and they don't necessarily have to be on the opposite sides. But how would you know how much great you experience without knowing how much bad you experience? It's kind of like that kind of like scale of that number 11 that kind of like really comes to mind. And we need to embrace this pain, because this pain serves the purpose. That's that karmic pain where we kind of like release it. That self-respect gets us to kind of like understand people more, and even understand the situation. And if somebody doesn't want us, to be able to say, okay, fine, I understand, and thank you very much for being part of my journey. It ability to say that with that calm voice, and like the high priestess, she usually doesn't even say that, she just usually observes that. This is like that psychic ability to pick up on it, where people see that you basically just shrug your shoulders, and then you don't have that emotional pain body like that they can kind of like bite into it. Kind of like things are actually moving forward in a much kind of like easier direction. So, and again, don't run away from the problems. The religious factor, I don't know, to me this card is more or less also marriage. It's kind of, maybe somebody is not seeing glaring problems, which I see that could be problems that are generated. So you have 4 of swords, you have 6 of pentacles, and then 8 of swords. You're actually getting lots of swords in the reading, so it's going to be lots of thinking this month. See, the 6 of pentacles is kind of like really talking about the sharing, and That's exactly what I said. This is kind of like, I think, more or less shared ideas. Kind of like meeting somebody is also what people kind of like go with hoping for the best. But they're hoping for the best on their own terms, which is the key in a relationship. And then when something doesn't happen, that's where the kind of like rifts start to kind of like be generated. So instead, how about, whether or not this looks rigid, kind of like, look, instead of avoiding this and hoping things will somehow work out, maybe just kind of like say, look, this is what I want, and this kind of like didn't work for me in the past. So, kind of like putting this down and seeing the reaction of the people, and even if they agree at you at that point, but they kind of like do something later that kind of like goes against the grain, then you know that they actually don't care what is meaningful to you. And, you know, if somebody really cares, even on the minimal level, just as a human being, just, like doing something that probably you kind of like talked about is harmful or hurtful, just like speaks for itself. Now, codependency, just like as you got it here, has this Knave of Wands, Page of Wands, which kind of like is the new energy, and I also have Knave of Pentacles, and yet another 4. So 444, kind of like getting things in order, is basically the name of the day. And I really think you're kind of like really realizing that certain things just like simply exhausting for you. Look at that kitty. Very much. It's just like one eye just like barely open. Okay, what is this? Like something new happening? Like, looks like nothing can please this person. When you fall into codependency, especially if it talks about, relationship, it's not only you can be codependent in many different ways. You can be addicted to drugs, you can be addicted to liquor. So, but it looks like you're going to kind of like get this, I guess, a new routine. You will want to go in a new routine and kind of like work on it. And that enthusiasm is going to actually create some kind of like workable plan. But you might, again, just like any codependent, fall down and kind of like maybe give up on it. Because even here, this is like really telling me that there are like certain ways that it's kind of like really difficult for you, because there's like, you have a fear of letting something go, or of letting somebody go, or there is like a denial, which also can, right, we also had that card of denial, and right, in this kind of like general opening. Now it's kind of like really interesting. I also see children over here. You might have and you see, this is really important when people don't understand, especially if you're mothers or fathers. Your issues also are issues of your own children, and how you set this world for them, what kind of example you set, is going to set them on a good course. You don't really want to set them like toward the iceberg, right? So showing that you respect others, and but also you have the line in sand, it's kind of like really, really important. Well, this is your environment, and again, it says children. It kept being repetitive, children, and then you have the magician, this kind of like new boost, and kind of like all the tools. So it looks like somebody in your life, it says it's being affected by children, but to me, this card means that either you're dealing with somebody who maybe has children and they're like kind of like need for adjustment, but more than anything else, this really talks about somebody's inner child, because we kind of like meet that perception of somebody as much as they need their perception of us. So this is coming later in a relationship where you can kind of like allow to be vulnerable, which you looks like you're protecting for now, and kind of like allow them in your world. And there's like 8 of Cups reversed and 7 of Wands reversed. Like there is like somebody coming back, or maybe something that you did put on the back burner is like becoming kind of like, actual again. This is kind of a card of wonder, kind of like what else is out there. And then when we come back from that wonder, it means that we are pretty happy where we are. But this also talks about somebody not holding their fort, which kind of like it goes in tune with sort of like that overwhelming sense of, okay, can we all kind of like get along? It kind of like would be really, really cool. So your hopes and fears are about, is what I've seen, like religious factor, the Hierophant, the Sun, whether or not you're with somebody, like you kind of like really want that little kind of like piece of love for yourself. So you see, your hopes are that certain things can be built. So if you're with somebody, maybe you're dealing with this partner who's promising things, but you're really not sure if they really mean it, because they did drop these balls too many times. Or if you're not with anybody, then this is really telling you that, there is like this balance that is still not established. And when this balance is established, because you see, that's the life, and kind of like seeing things, around us, and not just hearing the nicest words that we want to hear, because on both of these cards we have water and we have ships. And in this particular card, even though this water seems to be pretty turbulent, if you can see it, the ship seems to feel really, really solid. But this card is reversed. So maybe somebody is making lots of promises in terms of, yes, sure, maybe, it was decision, we are going to get steady, we are going to get serious, but then, maybe person is manipulator, because the King of Cups, and here you had somewhere Knight of Cups, looks like there will be possibly proposal, engagement. You kind of like on some level feel this is something wrong. You really want it for yourself. You really, really do. You want to build it. But something is kind of like holding you back. And I think you need to kind of get your answers. This is what clearly is telling you. It's going to be overall a joyous month for you, from what I see. You will be dealing with certain kind of like dark nooks of yourself and facing your own things. And I think in the very end, you're going to say, okay, this is what I need, and A, B, C, D. And that's all I need. Everything else I can work on. And kind of like that can be something kind of like soft, like I need love, and this is what love means for me, not just kind of generic love. And people showing up on time, people being reliable and helpful, etc., and so on and so forth, right? So where you kind of have this clear idea. So when people come to your life and they don't do that, well, you don't dump them. You basically say, well, I'm kind of like, really, this is what I'm wishing for me, and what is like this for you. And then you hear them, and maybe, remember in this card, kind of like shedding this ego, maybe they come up with something else. So maybe that's kind of going to give you some kind of pause to think about it, but maybe it's going to give you a pause and saying, wait a minute, that is basically a road to nowhere. That's the road that can cost me quite a bit, of my nerves, of my money, of my patience. So it's going to be lots of observation toward others this month. So where this heading is kind of like observing and communicating, and kind of like moving forward, slow and steady, kind of like wins the basically the race. And from all the knights, this one is just like the Knight of Swords upright. There are two really good knights to be upright, because this one maybe doesn't move with the speed, but this is the speed that you currently need, because you need to adapt to new situation. And there you go, you have the Lovers. And there you go. Slow and steady wins the race, guys. Not rushing it, following your instincts, observing what other people do, waiting for them to actually do what they say they would do is all kind of good thing. If they don't measure up, you need to release that fish back into the ocean, because they are just not going to do well in the long term. So I have pulled one more card for you. I'm just wondering where I put it. Interestingly enough, remember in the general reading we did have this Loyal Heart, and you got Come Together. So you guys are going to really go through this entire month getting to know you and getting to know what you really need. So let me read this for you guys, and just so you remember, it can be really month that anything can be expected, because after all we did get a Tower for all of us. But one thing that you do know is you, and you will know sort of like if certain things are feeling comfortable or not comfortable for you. And there is no need for rushing anything. We all kind of like can pace ourselves to get where we need to get. So I really think you need to give yourself that basically gift of time and gift of really knowing and clearly understanding the other person. And if this means that they are not great for you, well, that's so be it. At least it gives it time to kind of like find somebody else and face your own fears of losing this person, or understanding that, hey, this is maybe the best solution for me. So if you want your private reading, you can contact me via my website, cattarot.ca, and take advantage of the special. But let me read this for you to seal this reading. It says, love needs to be shared. Love needs to be expressed. Drawing the Come Together card is a sign that you are on the path to discover the nature of this emotion in all its forms of expression: romantic, familial, unconditional, spiritual. In each instance, there is another being involved. Love involves a give and take between you and significant other, a relative, a friend, an animal, and a spirit. This card assures you that love has come calling and seeks a partner in its dance. Now that you are cherished, like a magnet, you are attracting love into your life. This is a time for harmonious, caring partnerships. And I really think you will be really crucial in this process, because you're going to put let's say you're put down, but in a very nice and soft, gentle way, simply through self-discovery, simply through figuring out what you really truly need. And when you truly find what you need, and when you kind of like learn how to love yourself first, stabilize yourself, and reach mature decisions, all of a sudden these gates will open, and the love is going to enter your life. But nothing happens seamlessly. In your case, the maturity will be observing to see if people are doing what they are saying, and also communicating your own needs and your own rules of engagement if you wish. So, my dear Virgo, I wish you happy birthday, and I'm looking forward to your orders, and even more so to the comments from you. So if you guys are not subscribed, you see this little button over here, please press subscribe, because I still have that weekly, win the free, 15 minutes with me. So you just have to come to this live and show up and hopefully be drawn. So until the next time, you know that I love you. All the best.